I'm Bruce Martin.
And I'm Roger Martin.
And welcome to the podcast with a name. Now, Roger, why are you so close? Are you trying to be more prominent than me?
Well, I know it's not been our shtick, but it has a good.
Can you see me now?
I like.
Okay. Now we're back.
Episode 3.
Episode 3, and this is the big reveal episode, which is huge.
What are we revealing?
Today we're revealing the name of the podcast and our podcast sponsor for the day.
Well, that is what I want to see us do is the sponsor, so we can keep doing this.
Okay, so today's podcast, this is Bruce and Roger Make a Podcast number 3. This is sponsored by the Rob Abercrombie Real Estate Team in Huntsville, Alabama.
We won't stop.
Coldwell Banker, a fantastic crew of people. And the reason we've decided that Rob would be our sponsor today, Rob didn't make that decision. We made that for him. But
we're not going to decide his amount.
No.
His sponsorship amount is just going to flow out of his own generous heart. He's just a beautiful man. Right. The typical sponsorship that we're looking to get for this particular show is $100,000 a year. Sure.
But he doesn't have to do that.
No. Right.
But the reason that
but he's very generous.
He is. And the reason we brought him in today as our sponsor, he came up with the name for the podcast. You know, we've done, this will be our 3rd episode without a name.
Right.
So today's going to be the big reveal of the name. We had some great offerings early on. I mean, some of you guys, your creativity, it's like Bruce talks intelligently about stuff and Roger brings trivia. That was one of my favorites. I like that. Roger wasn't
as fun. I think you submitted that one.
Nope, didn't submit that one. That was from people right out there in podcast land. So thank you for all of those things that you did in terms of sending the title in. So are you guys ready? I mean, because we had some good ones, but this is, I'm so excited.
We're doing now? Shouldn't there be some kind of suspense? We should have thought of a drum roll, maybe some kind of or lifting up placards.
Why don't you do the drum roll? I've got it on my phone. So it's my job to show you, because we not only got the name, but we got some beautiful, amazing artwork to go with the name of the new podcast.
Amazing, maybe a strong term, but
are you ready, guys, out there in the world?
Yes. Why are you covering my face?
Can you
with
see
the
it?
artwork?
Yeah. Oh,
yes.
Can you not see Roger? It's Inglorious Pastords.
Pastords with a P
with a P.
Yes.
And we thought that was the perfect name because we're both ex-pastors and we talk about all sorts of things. However, this is where we're stuck right now. So Inglorious Pastords, that's the name of the podcast. So when you look it up on Spotify or wherever you listen, that's where you're going to find it. But we still need some help.
We need a lot of it.
We need as much help as we needed before, but we need help on the subtitle now. You realize a subtitle is critically important because a subtitle, so if a person just sees Inglorious Pastords, they're like, that's fantastic. That's probably an amazing podcast. But we want to move them from thinking that's an amazing podcast to clicking that's an amazing podcast. And you know what does that? Subtitle and description. So Roger in the first podcast did a super job of coming up with the description. The Martin brothers sit down and have a conversation where the discussion swings wildly from the silly things to serious Jesus talk.
Yes.
Something like that. It was very good. That's not my forte. But that's more of a descriptor, okay? We need the subtitle. So it's something. You ready, Raj?
Well, part of the question. So
apparently he is ready. Why don't you share, Roger?
Well, I mean, so part of what we were in disagreement about and wrestling with. So is something like, should brothers, is it important that people know that we're brothers? Is it important that they know, so it should the Martin brothers be a part of it? Or are they saying, Who really cares about the Martin Brothers? Who are they? And does that matter? Roger and Bruce, does that matter?
Oh yeah, we had a lot of people coming in with R&B, which is cool. I love the vibe, R&B. But people don't know that stuff. I mean, that could be like Reggie and Brian.
Right.
Well, and they might have
that's not us.
Well, they might have a better podcast, frankly. So we don't want to send people over there. So we're thinking, how can we get a subtitle? So this is ex-pastors talk about life, laughter, and the hereafter, with a shout out to Rachel Morales on that one. That was
Rachel had several.
She sent us like 6 very good subtitles. She thought they were titles. She was wrong about that because they weren't. But any one of those could have been an amazing subtitle. So Rachel, you just keep sending those things in. It's like letters to Santa Claus. You just hold your breath and there's a letter coming back to you. But then Roger reminded me you can't actually talk about laughter because that would be silly.
Kind of weird, yes. So it can't be we talk about life and laughter. That only works as a title, not as a subtitle. So should
brothers
pastors be in there?
Yeah.
Should brothers be in there?
Roger's brothers need to be in there. I'm just telling you what I've heard so far. I love the idea of ex-pastors somewhere. It's a discussion / conversation.
Ex-pastor brothers. Now we have the verb. So talk.
No, that was good. Ex-pastor brothers. Now that could be confusing because we're not ex-brothers.
But that could happen at some
Anytime
point.
now. Okay, so
before this podcast is over, possibly.
Ex-pastor brothers.
So now verbs. I sort of like banter.
Ex-pastors and brothers. Banter about
everything.
Yes.
We've got it. That's it.
We need your help. So here's it. Roger has decided now. Not only does Rob Abercrombie win the iPad, which was huge, Roger is now donating an Apple Watch to the person who comes up with the subtitle, having something to do with ex-pastors and brothers banter about stuff together.
And honestly, Roger didn't even know there was an Apple Watch.
There is an Apple Watch. Yeah, Mark has one.
Oh, no, I
Yeah, it's like that. You can talk to it, and it talks to you. It's like a phone, computer, heart monitor. He has to have that now at his advanced age, and it tells you what your heartbeat is. It tells him how many steps he went, all that kind of stuff. I don't really track that kind of thing. I walk places. I'm not thinking in my little head, 327, 328. It's just not me. But Apple Watch out there, it's on the table for the subtitle now.
So people may be a little weary of the work of kind of picking names and everything for us. Maybe they just like to know a little bit more about the delightful place and background we have here and where we are for this week's episode.
We are in Hollywood, California.
I'm not.
Okay. We're in New Smyrna Beach, Florida.
I am there. Yes.
Roger's there. We're in a condo called Hacienda del Sol 2. We've been coming here for 40 years. Our family has come down here every year, last week of May. Beautiful. Shout out to Hacienda. If you're ever looking for a place to stay on the ocean, for a week at a time, Hacienda del Sol 2 in New Smyrna Beach. And Hacienda, if you're listening and you want to be a sponsor, you can do that as well.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Hacienda
because we've been sponsoring them for a lot of years.
We've been sponsoring them for 40 years, frankly. It's time to get a little something out of that, I think. So we've talked about the name. We got it. Inglorious Pastords. That's awesome. We're looking for a subtitle. We've got some fabulous.
Now, where can people put the suggestions for the subtitles?
We got fabulous artwork. See it? There it is. I can't see Roger, but I can see some fabulous artwork. I realize it's backwards for all of you guys out there in video land. What are we going to talk about today?
Well, it's funny because being on vacation is an interesting time, starts raising questions about serving others. So I actually read an interesting thing reading a book this week.
Hold on. You're on vacation, and the first thing that comes to mind is serving others. Roger is so Christ-like. Sometimes I feel embarrassed just to be in his presence, because when I come on vacation, I'm thinking pretty much self-serving thoughts the entire week. But
that's the point.
That's me. Okay, go ahead.
No.
Serving. Got
so
it.
Often that's what happens with vacation. You're coming in thinking about, what do I want to happen this week? But Tim Keller, in a book, King's Cross, so that was my book to read this week. Sorry, Tim, I haven't gotten as far in it as I would like to have.
If Redeemer Prez is wanting to sponsor, they are welcome.
That would be outstanding.
Do that. Go right ahead, though. That Tim Keller,
no,
I'm with you.
Good book. And actually, why I've only gotten so far is I'm trying to digest what he said.
Oh my gosh.
But there's this beautiful image that he uses about God and this reality that Father, Son, and Spirit are constantly looking to serve each other and looking out for one another and glorifying each other. So you start seeing these different places in the Bible. The Son wants to glorify the Father, and the Father wants to glorify the Son, and the Spirit is glorifying all of them. And it's like nobody's concerned about who's getting the praise. No one's concerned about who's getting the credit. Everyone in this beautiful, mysterious, we're not explaining the Trinity here, but Father, Son, and Spirit, the image that he uses, and he quotes C.S. Lewis, is they're almost orbiting around each other, and no one is fighting to be the center.
Yeah.
And so there's just this image of what C.S. Lewis calls almost a dance, that God is not static, but it's this dance of love and serving and caring for one another. But what really hit me then, and then where I've kind of, for even this week, is he asked the question, so why did God make us? He didn't make us because he needed someone to love him. He didn't need someone to orbit around him. That was already there. God, Father, Son, and Spirit.
God's already in a love relationship.
Right. So we were made to join in the party. We were made, and Lewis's term is join in the dance.
Yeah.
There's this, he says, if you'll not consider me irreverent, it's almost as if God is a dance, and it's this dance of serving and giving and praising one another, and no one's concerned with who's getting the credit. And it's just, so I've had these little glimpses of moments, what it would look like for me, and they're just glimpses, mind you, of if I didn't have to be the center. Because he raises the picture, you can imagine when you have a handful or group of people and everyone wants to be the center, well, things go sideways. And this is what can happen on vacation.
Sure.
So just think now, what does it look like? And this is the challenge for me, is starting to have a meter ready when I'm realizing, I'm moving to the center, and I'm wanting my wife Joy to orbit around me. I'm wanting Bruce to orbit, I'm wanting the games we're playing on the beach. I'm beginning to think, how do I look here? What am I? Those kind of things. Not that we've had any games at the beach that I've lost or anything or looked badly at.
Well, and before we even go there, so I'm a little simpler than Roger. All right. So Roger reads C.S. Lewis and Tim Keller. I read cartoons sometimes. Peanuts is good. But I remember how the Trinity was explained to me by, I think it was Lee Kearney in our junior boys class in Sunday school. God was described as an egg. Okay. Stay with me. So you had the shell, you had the egg white inside, and then you had the yolk, but it's still an egg, 3 in 1. The problem with that analogy is inevitably the yolk was at the center, and Roger's painting a picture with Tim Keller that there's the center in that sense. God is, and the term you didn't use was working together. Because I love those things where Jesus that Jesus says, "My Father is at work to this day, and I too am working." And we know the Spirit is working. And it's this thing of all of them are working. And I love the beauty of that. One of the most comforting things to me is that God didn't create the world, set it spinning into motion, and then go, let's just see what happens. Just always at work. And again, never a sense of who's the greatest, and who did this better.
Which is stunning when you start thinking that maybe the greatest quality of God, and of course, what an interesting discussion that would be, is his humility. Not concerned.
Yeah.
Even when Jesus walks the planet with us, not concerned that he's always getting the credit. In fact, at different times he's saying, don't make a big deal. Don't say a lot about this.
Don't tell anybody.
He's pulling a towel and he's washing the feet of others. But he's not announcing, oh, I'm now washing the feet of everyone. The Lord and Messiah. It's like, that's just not a concern. And so it's just thinking, if in little moments, what would it look like for me not to, I'm starting to see little places, lots of places where I'm just expecting people and things to orbit around me. When I get in a car, it's as if, all the other drivers should be orbiting around
Roger
me.
genuinely thinks it's about him when he's driving a car. Can't understand why anyone would have the audacity to pull in front of him. Not like they could be going someplace more important than him.
Or why would they be driving slower than the speed limit and slowing me down on the place where I want to go?
And this idea, now this is something I hadn't thought of this until you said it, but this idea of the humility of God. Some people would be horrified by that thought. Because when we think of God, it's the glory of God, and we can't even come close to explaining that. But this idea of the humility of God and the way that Jesus came to earth, it really was all wrong. You're coming as a baby in weakness from Nazareth in Galilee.
Yeah.
Even the way that Jesus was born, it was just a bad time. The world's being taxed. Mary and Joseph aren't married. She has the baby, on the way. The water breaks. It was just a horrific night, and the baby Jesus is placed in a feeding trough. It just made me think that even the humility of the way that Jesus came to earth, he came as a king, but he was demonstrating a different kind of kingness and a different kind of kingdom. And it was a kingdom based on serving and a kingdom based on
not control,
humility. And it does make me think of how many times he would do something extraordinary and then say, don't tell anyone.
Yeah.
Or if he's about to raise someone from the dead, he would get everyone out of the room. If someone in our culture, let's say a televangelist, was going to raise someone from the dead, there's going to be a Facebook Live going on. There's going to be a public service announcement. You're going to have cameras everywhere. There's going to be this amazing, everybody watch for it. And Jesus was the opposite of that. And this is something we need to talk about at some point. This celebrity culture that we've created around pastors and leaders, and I think it flows from Hollywood, but now it's somehow wrangled its way into the kingdom of heaven.
And we've been there as pastors.
We've been part of the problem.
Felt that weight of just buying into the way, which is less around serving, and it's more about image, and it's more about views and counts and following. And Jesus was wonderfully unconcerned. In fact, it almost seemed like when the crowd was getting really big,
right.
It's almost like we need to thin this out. Maybe I'll talk about eating my body and drinking my blood.
Yeah, that's it.
We might lose a few there.
That was not.
Do you think Peter pulled him off the side on that one?
Peter pulled him aside on that one. It's a little bit like the first message that he did, in his hometown. And right afterwards, they tried to assassinate him. A lot of times we forget that.
In his hometown.
Yeah. So Jesus, 5,000 people, he's fed them, but he explains some things to his disciples. In essence, he says, they're only following me because they got free food out of the deal.
Yep.
So he says, I'm going to do some really hard teaching here. So he basically does this hard teaching about, unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no part with me. And according to the count in Scripture, 4,988 people stopped following.
Right.
And Jesus even looks at his disciples. He looks at them and goes, okay, are you guys going too?
Yeah.
And I can imagine Peter just going, Jesus, I have no idea what you just said, but we're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Because we believe that you're the truth. You're the real thing. You have the words of life. And of course, then Jesus later on explained, I'm speaking in spirit here. But it is interesting that Jesus was not looking to. There was another time in Capernaum. Remember, crowds were coming. They were coming to the house, and he was healing people. Mm-hmm. And it said that Jesus got up early one day and went off by himself. And I think in this prayer time with the Father, because this was becoming kind of a headquarters. If you're going to set up a ministry, Capernaum was the place.
Yeah.
All of these people are coming. Thousands of people are coming to Capernaum. They've heard about Jesus healing people. And he goes and prays with Father. And the Father says it's time to go to other cities. And so Peter, taking Jesus aside, catches him up there on the mountain. Hey, everybody's looking for you, Jesus. Time to go back down there and do the ministry stuff, the healing, because we are getting some traction with this kingdom thing now. And Jesus says, no.
Let's go to the next town.
Let's go to the next town. And then he says something interesting. He said, because that's the reason I came.
Yeah.
Not to become a super celebrity in one place, but to bring the kingdom and to keep, because he would tell parables about sowing seed. Yeah. But to keep sowing the seed here, we're going to sow it in Capernaum. We're going to sow it over here in Galilee. We're going to sow it here. We're going to sow it there. And he's constantly sowing seed. He wasn't just going to stay in one place. And part of the struggle that I have with the church as we know it today is it's often very building centric. In other words, we have this idea that kingdom things happen at the church building. And it's been interesting how COVID-19 has affected that. I just got word from our local church that they were planning to start back June 7th, but they're going to push back meeting, in person again. Jesus was constantly on the move. And it just makes me wonder how much all of us as kingdom people should be more on the move in the way of sowing seed, always sowing seed, always sowing seed.
So it's funny how a thought like that can kind of mess up your vacation. We had an idea this week to play bocce, which is a fun game introduced to us by friends years ago.
Fantastic time playing bocce this week. Wasn't that fun?
Well, it wasn't as fun for me. But that's when I had one of those moments where I realized
I suck at bocce.
And then after that, I thought, I don't like to suck at bocce. And I don't like other people to see me suck at bocce. And
so Roger wasn't feeling like serving in that moment. See, I didn't realize, well, that's not true. I knew Roger was bad at bocce. I didn't know how bad. On a previous riding break, we played 6 times, and I won 6 times. And since we've come to Florida, we've had 3 or 4 games together, and I've won, 4 of those games. The number you have to reach in bocce is 10. I think the first time I won 10-3.
That's correct.
And the second time it was...
No. So the second one, I was like, all right, I'm going to come back and unhumiliate myself.
Right.
And how did I do that?
With a 10-0, as I recall. Yeah.
Shut up.
Never scored a point. Friends, you have to understand, bocce's not that hard, all right? You got a little white ball, and you got these big, heavier balls, and you just got to throw one closer to the ball.
Hard.
And Mr. Him, there just never could get it close to the white ball. So, but he was a servant in that he picked up the balls and carried them back to the canopy so that others could play better than him.
But if I think about
sponsorship, I'm sorry. No, stay with that.
No. If I think about, stay with me, how God. So let's say the Father, Son, and Spirit are playing bocce, right? As I understand the beauty of God, they're just getting a huge kick out of you winning. In other words, they're just so much fun the Father is having that Jesus is shutting him out. No, I
thought you were talking about them watching our game.
No, they're playing.
Because I think they're getting tickled at you. That Roger, bless his heart.
Well, and possible it could have been the wind of the Spirit did shift a few of my throws a little bit.
I will say I had 2 miracle throws in those games. I mean, like where the ball's like 60 yards out and I throw it and it lands on it. I mean, it just stopped. It's just like perched on top of it. Oh.
But that was my serious moment of, I can live that way. In fact, that's what it would look like to fully enjoy Bruce's joy in crushing me. Because I think that's really because at some point I was just so concerned with me, I didn't care how much fun you were having. And I cut this moment where, right? And there's where, I know that sounds like a simple thing, but I realize I can always find things to find joy in what's happening around others. There's where I realized there's a little moment where I wanted things to revolve around me, but I can actually, if I'm thinking, I can revolve around Bruce. Can I find joy in Bruce he gets to have the great score. He gets to look like the superior player, and I'm not concerned that he looks superior or that he is. And I think that's the beauty of God is Father, Son, Spirit. No one's concerned about, again, the most credit. They're finding joy in each other's joy. They're finding joy. So, that's.
I hope Marlene is watching this. I think there's a lot she could really glean about
learning to orbit around
orbit around Bruce. I
don't think you've learned anything.
I hope the whole concept. But no, I had the same moment. I've had the same moment over the last 3 days. So, Roger and I also like to play golf. And twice this week we've gone out and Roger has played, frankly, out of his head. And he's beaten me twice.
I'm playing something.
I need to tell you, I'm having fun watching Roger play well. I mean, I really am. And that's interesting because that's a change for both of us because both of us can be very, very competitive. But I'm enjoying the fact that he's playing well, that he's out driving me with a putter. It's ridiculous. So
I'm not sure how much you were enjoying it on the 7th hole.
7th hole, 10th hole.
The 10th,
The 10th hole when I took a 7.
He lost a little joy on the 10th.
Yeah, lost 4
His
strokes.
joy in Roger's game began to wane.
It might have diminished a little bit, but it resurfaced. It resurfaced.
No, we did have moments watching a good putt that either one would have, but I think also then in just enjoying the grace of God and just a beautiful day and.
So
we didn't kill each other.
I'm going to make a non-segue to something I want to talk about now. So now we're going to talk about.
Let's orbit around you.
No, it's not that. No, it's something I've been thinking as I watch. So not just the coronavirus, but the racial tension and problems that we're having in our culture right now, and there's all sorts of things that this affects. But I've been talking a little bit to Roger about what I believe is the voice of dissent in culture. There's always in my mind a majority narrative, and what happens is more and more in our culture, conversations are not only becoming binary, where you have to be one or the other, for or against, black or white, Republican, Democrat, but now it's moved to where it's now an antagonistic polarity, where if you don't think what I think, you're stupid, and someone will say, "Hey, I'm not sure about the COVID-19." My doctor says this, and another person, will literally lash out on Facebook, "I hope you die of coronavirus." And it's become this thing where you can't even have a dissent from the majority narrative. So it's something I've just been thinking about, even the importance of the Supreme Court. When the Supreme Court writes an opinion, makes a ruling, there's one of the judges that is also writing a dissenting opinion. And to me, that's an important thing, because I think we forget that when Jesus hit the planet, the majority narrative really was that good things kind of happened to good people, and God was all about good people, and bad people were out, and God was not concerned about them. And Jesus became the voice of dissent, not only in the people that he hung out with, but in the way that he was taking away from this geopolitical empire that they were building up, the Jewish nation, the nation of Israel. God's going to restore that. And he began to tell a different narrative that eventually got him killed. Remember, they said at one point, the Sanhedrin leaders said at one point, if he keeps going on like this, we're going to lose both our place and our nation. And so it became, we've got to kill him. In other words, there's no room for Jesus to be teaching a new thing.
Yeah.
And for us to learn from that. No, this is the majority narrative. This is the narrative that we're comfortable with. This is, stay with me, the narrative that keeps us in power. So if this person takes from it, we're going to have to silence their voice. It's just been interesting to watch, even on COVID-19, how sometimes the voice of dissent has been silenced.
Yeah. No, and I think that's sobering. The sobering reality that there's more and more resistance to hearing something, right, that goes against what
I already believe.
And that is what Jesus killed. And repeated attempts, even when we think about his hometown, you were mentioning that earlier.
Yep.
And I'm seeing this growing level of antagonism about any idea. Again, it's not just that I disagree. There's a kind of animosity. There's a kind of venom. There's a switch. I just thought about it. All right. So when I think about, Jesus' first sermon. So he's in his hometown, opens up the scroll. Everyone's listening to him. And there was a point at which people in his hometown are going, my goodness, what gracious words he's been given in this. And we're so proud.
We're so proud of the hometown boy that's done good. And then he says, in essence, I'm the Messiah. And they're like, take him out and kill him. It just didn't fit their narrative. They were looking for something different, and they weren't open to learning something different. Interesting enough, Jesus reads that passage, was it Isaiah 53? The passage in Isaiah that talks about, I've come to free the captives and heal the sick and open the eyes of the blind. And then he says, today, this has been fulfilled in your presence. And at that moment, everyone went, pardon me?
Because the narrative, that didn't, well, certainly. Oh, no, we already know how God's going to do this. We're already very clear. We've got God clearly in this box here, and he's already said this is what it's going to look like. And Jesus was the ultimate dissenting opinion.
Yes.
He was, in fact, this was constantly a point of agitation. And by the way, again, even with the 12, but
Jesus, the popular narrative is that the Messiah is going to rule. He's going to take over, and it's going to be finally all the wrongs are going to be righted. And in truth, that's exactly what happened, but it didn't look the way. They still didn't understand this whole thing of suffering and dying and all of that. So Jesus at one point just flat out tells them, he had alluded to it, but he flat out tells them, I'm going to go to Jerusalem. I'm going to be handed over to the Romans. I'm going to be killed.
And Peter.
And Peter takes Jesus aside and says, hey, Jesus, that whole death narrative, that's really not going to fly with people. I don't think we want to make, like the key point, of what we're doing. So he says, Jesus, that will never happen to you. And of course,
Jesus had a kind of a strong word there.
Jesus had a counter narrative there, which was, get behind me, Satan. And he said it this way. He said, because you're only seeing this from man's perspective. Yeah. You have in mind the ideas of men, but you don't understand the heart of God about this thing. And it's just something I continue to think about, the voice of dissent and how much I have to learn still from people that I disagree with. Because at certain points, Roger, I see it in myself. I already believe this thing, a certain thing to be true. And so if someone comes with something that's different than the narrative that I already know to be true, I will find myself arguing against it or silencing it.
I've had it happen to me this week. So again, one of the things we love on vacation is conversations and talking about things and discussing things. But more than once, for all the glowing things we're saying about conversation and we're open to dissenting ideas, I've had those moments where someone shared an idea, where a moment I'm saying, how could anyone thinking person possibly hold that? And I just have this check immediately where I realize I'm starting to go into that. Oh, I've got this clear. There's not a reasonable other possibility here. And I've had to have that check. And And I guess that's one of the things we're hoping, even for this
Yes.
podcast, is because this word conversation, and we act as if, well, that's, okay, well, it's just a kind of a friendly banter. But conversation means we're talking about a lot of things, and there's a work to conversation, to what I'll say, staying in the conversation.
Yes.
And one of the things that's been great, that by the grace of God, we may be able to model in moments, because we've done it for so many years, is I found Bruce repeatedly have moments where put out a dissenting opinion. He's putting out something that I don't believe, or something that I have not held to.
And Roger shut me down immediately. No, he didn't.
And the beauty is, in most cases, we don't shut each other down.
And listen, this idea of embracing the dissenting opinion, it can save some marriages. All right. So a lot of a lot of the work that I do is counseling, and I try to help people have conversations instead of debates, because the idea of debate is there's going to be a winner and there's going to be a loser.
Yep.
So I try to help them have what I call safe conversations, and I tell people, particularly if your spouse or someone else is telling you something that you don't want to hear, or that doesn't fit your own narrative, I always tell people, so if you don't have anything else to say, if you're having that moment like you just want to say the wrong thing, one thing you can always say is, tell me more. In other words, you're inviting the other person to tell you more, instead of just jumping in with a tirade about why that's wrong. The other thing I teach people is, and I'm still trying to learn this, ask curious questions. Not accusatory questions like, how in the world could you think that? That's so stupid, or that's inane, or that's not going to be a conversation. That's going to shut the other person down. But if you'll ask curious questions, hey, tell me more about that. How did you come to that conclusion? Or tell me the experience in your life that brought you to that place, because that's powerful. We don't realize how often the narrative that we embrace is actually attached to our experience.
Right.
I've experienced something, and so now for me, I know this to be absolutely true. Another thing this weekend that I've been really pondering, and we're all over the map today, but it's this thing that I tend to think that people process life the way that I process life. So, and I'm realizing, no, they don't. What can be for one person a very traumatic sort of thing, for another person, this is an adventure. So on certain things, like when I take people out in the wilderness, and an ice storm comes, and it's snowing, and it's just getting colder and colder, and the wind is howling.
Happens on a lot of.
Which happens.
We won't even have a conversation about how many lightning events Bruce has taken groups.
My fun meter is going up, 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 and I'm just like, this is so awesome. But then I'm looking in the eyes of others,
and you're not seeing awesome.
No, what I'm seeing is, this is awful, and we are all going to die. And it's your fault. And so I'm like, sometimes I realize we assume people process life or the same experiences the same way, and they don't. And that's why even it's been fun this week, because our nieces and nephews have grown up. Holy cow. So now they're like 18 to 30 years old. It's crazy. So now they're adults participating in the conversation. And I find myself wanting to correct them, because their narrative and their life experience is a little different than my life experience. But I'm better now about asking curious questions. Hey, how did you come to that belief system? What made you feel so strongly about that? And it's often connected to a story or an event in their life. And in that moment, I grow as a person, because now my level of understanding has gone up. They didn't process maybe even the same event in their childhood the way that I did. If you look at the six siblings in the Martin family, we had the same parents. But if you listen to us describe our childhood, some parts are the same, but a lot of it's different because we processed it differently. We process our parents differently. We process certain events differently. And so if we'll look at life differently, in other words, there's got to be a place for a counter narrative. There's got to be room for the voice of dissent. And it doesn't mean that I'm always going to agree with that dissenting opinion. Roger and I, we had an interesting discussion last week in my office, and I realized this is just something we don't agree on. But I didn't leave that space thinking I'm less smart now. I didn't.
No, actually, I think we both end up. I walked away at a certain point. I've got more to think about, which means right. I'm going to be more likely to be a wiser, more thoughtful. Because I've got something else to think about. And there's where, and even with a couple of conversations I've had this week where I realized, actually, this dissenting idea is a gift. It's a call to look at my own fallibility and say, this is a place where I might be wrong. This is a place I need to study further. This is something I need to look at. And so often, because I was thinking about this, how often a dissenting opinion, and I'm not sure, angers me. So you start getting, even with our conversation last week, I just felt at one point, I was getting just a little agitated. And I realized a dissenting opinion creates a little unsettledness that can often kind of create anger. And you have to stay in the moment and say, wait, I could be wrong here, so I want to keep listening. I want to,
and that's why that that's just huge. Because sometimes when someone's telling a counter narrative or a dissenting opinion from what we already believe or what we already know,
right?
We can feel several weak emotions. Because you said you were feeling a little anger come up. Well, anger is a secondary emotion. It's a powerful emotion, and often
it felt primary at that time.
Right. We tend to act out of it, but there's usually a weaker emotion underneath, which might be that the whole thesis of your book, gosh, I may be wrong about this. And part of that weak emotion of I may be wrong, or I'm confused, or this counter narrative is frustrating, and we can go to that place of anger. And that's why I say, even when married couples are having a tough conversation, it can still be a safe conversation when I say, hey, tell me more. And sometimes I'll feel that thing rising up, because that conversation last week, I felt a little of that. I'm going to use the word frustration. Frustration's the weak emotion. Roger apparently reverts to the anger emotion, which is the power emotion up here.
See where my honesty is coming through. He's just frustrated.
But some of that frustration was, I'm just going to be really honest. Why can't Roger see what I see so clearly? Why does this have to be so difficult? And some of that is even the difference in the way that we process. We've told you guys before, Roger's really analytical, which I am not. The way I always describe Roger, and it's one of the things I love about him, Roger thinks through things, okay? I think about a lot of things. I really do. It would shock you what goes through my mind every day. I think about things all the time. But Roger, and this is where Roger has really helped me grow, Roger thinks through things in great detail. So sometimes I'll just throw some things out there to Roger, just lob some things out there, and then Roger will come back with 692 questions. And then I'm like, I don't even know what we're talking about anymore.
And I'm thinking about how long our podcast is getting.
Well, Roger, I think it's time we should talk about sponsorship. Yes. So I was thinking, this is me. We can
have multiple sponsors, not just our realtor friends.
Not just realtor friends. Thank you, Rob Abercrombie.
Yes, Rob.
Real estate group team thing in
generous,
Huntsville,
wonderful people.
If you want to buy a house, Rob's the guy to talk to. Okay, I'm just going to say that. But I was thinking, since this is a new podcast, we should probably start low. And I was thinking sponsorship levels could come in at 100,000. People can always give more, but if they want to come in on the base level, what do you think about that number?
I think it's a start, because if you want to maintain the quality of this podcast, you've got to have the sponsorship.
We do. So here's something else you can help us with. All right. Why don't you give us some more realistic, hey, maybe a person could actually sponsor your stupid podcast if you kept the numbers down here where normal human beings live. So why don't you throw out some numbers to us about, hey, I think maybe we could sponsor at this level. Maybe there might be a level for corporate sponsors. I even thought about a person who could sponsor a show. So for X number of dollars, they're sponsoring a show. And over time, it's going to become a thing to be a sponsor for Inglorious Pastords. I'm just telling you, It's going to be, well, hold on, wait. based on what we talked about earlier, in great humility, I tell you, it's going to be a big thing at some point.
Because we want to help you, we're encouraging you to be an early adopter. You don't want to get late in on this thing. You want to be early on, because then there's going to be a line of people wanting sponsorships.
Why are we both leaning in at the same time? You don't want to be the laggard. Okay, if you follow that, maybe it's the bell curve. You got the pioneers, you got the early adopters, you got the
I don't know anybody. Yes.
The slower adopters, then it's laggards.
Me.
No one wants to be the laggard. You don't want to be the last one to sponsor the podcast. So we're giving you a chance now to not only help us, here's where we're leaving them today. We need help with the subtitle. So Inglorious Pastords, we're good with that. And then we need a subtitle. Something about ex-pastors and brothers. You like the word banter.
I like the word banter, but you talk, discuss.
Something like Bruce is clearly superior. Roger's a bit of an imbecile. Whatever feels like it fits. That's what we're shooting for here. The other thing,
there's
more. Seriously, is well, you can help us with sponsorship numbers, yes. But hey, if there's something that you want us to talk about, if you're thinking, hey, I would love to hear Inglorious Pastords talk about this subject, I promise you. Oh, this is dangerous.
I'm slightly nervous now.
I pinky swear that we will talk about it. Okay, there may be a show that we have to ask our mom and dad not to listen to, but we will talk about it. So if there's a topic that you want us to handle, hey, I'd love to hear Inglorious Pastords on the topic of, we will go there. And
it could be a few years out, but we'll get there.
We'll get there eventually. So, those are things to think about.
So what do you say to finishing up? So do we need to have like a close, kind of a fun closing that we, that's all, folks.
Wasn't that Porky Pig and Looney Tunes?
That's all, folks. I think it works.
Here's where we're gonna go. Here's how we're gonna.
Okay, what's our line?
Our line's going to be. That's all I've got to say about that. I like that. I think that works. The Forrest Gump thing. That's all I've got to say. Actually, why do I have an English accent?
Kind of this mix with English and some other stuff that I don't want to hear again.
That's all I've got to say about that.
That's all, folks.
So we'll that's sounding better and better. We'll see you next week for another episode
4
of Inglorious Pastords. Thank you, Rob Abercrombie.
I think that went well.
I think it did. You'll have to end yours up there. I don't even know how to do that.
All right, let's find out how to end. Finish. We just finished.
Stop. There we go. Got it. Captured everything.
Got it.